Right now, what's happening in Nepal isn't just a story about a protest. It's a story about a revolution. A total revolution, actually. And it's being led by a generation the world used to call lazy and incapable.
Gen Z.
The Gen Z.
Gen Z.
Gen Z. The Gen Z.
Corruption has woven a web that is extinguishing the light of our futures. Youth, rise! We are the torch bearers of change. If we do not raise our voices, who will?
Every corruption in the country, from the local level to federal level, all the Nepalese citizens are fed up of corruption.
You know, they said they were entitled. Well, this is the story of how that same generation took down an entire government. And while all that was going on, guess what the major media outlets were doing? Not much. They were mostly silent on these events. And if they did cover them, they were telling a completely different story.
Let's take you to Kathmandu now. At least 13 people have been killed and dozens injured in the Nepali capital during a protest against the government's decision to block dozens of social media platforms.
They claimed that social media was just a tool for spreading lies, and that it was actually a bad influence on young people. It all kicked off on September 8th, 2025. Thousands of young people, many in their 20s and some still in school uniforms, gathered for what was supposed to be a peaceful march in Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal. This was a movement born from frustration with corruption, nepotism, and a lack of jobs. They were just carrying signs and chanting for a better future. But how did the government respond? Instead of listening, they used brute force. The police immediately hit them with water cannons, tear gas, and rubber bullets to disperse the crowd. But that's when it got truly horrific. In a brutal escalation, they started firing live ammunition. The result was devastating. At least 19 protesters were killed, including a 12-year-old child, and over 400 were injured. This wasn't a riot, you guys. This was an outright massacre. That violent crackdown lit a fuse. What was a peaceful protest exploded into a nationwide uprising. The number of people on the streets just kept growing, with demonstrations spreading from Kathmandu to Pokhara and Butwal. The youth were enraged, and they weren't just asking for change anymore. They were taking it. The Prime Minister's home went up in flames. The Parliament building was on fire. Protesters even chased down the finance minister and beat him with shoes. And in all that chaos, the former Prime Minister's wife was tragically killed when her house caught on fire. The story of Nepal's Gen Z, the generation that went from being completely written off to being the ones who brought an entire government to its knees. The revolution started just a few days earlier. On September 4th, 2025, the Nepalese government made a decision that shocked everyone. They suddenly blocked 26 of the most popular social media sites like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, WhatsApp, and Twitter. The official reason was that these apps didn't follow the new rules. They said the ban was needed to stop things like hate speech, fake news, and cybercrime. But was that really the whole story? People immediately became suspicious. While most apps were blocked, the Chinese app TikTok stayed online because it had followed the new rules. People saw the government's excuse as a weak attempt to silence them and control them, just like a dictator. They said it wasn't about safety, but about control. The ban had a huge impact right away. It hurt local businesses and the tourism industry, both of which use social media a lot. For millions of Nepalese people who live and work abroad, losing messaging apps like WhatsApp cut them off from their families. The government's plan failed completely. By taking away the online space for people to complain, they basically pushed all the anger out into the streets. The ban, instead of being a solution, became the main reason for the protests.
Kids in college uniform were shot dead, directly firing people in head and chest with motive to unalive, not injure. Attacking hospital by gunfire and tear gas to the people who were injured and getting treated there. Assaulting families of the injured people. Using ambulance to lure people when people go near the ambulance. One of them was shot and
This wasn't a riot, it was a massacre. But this revolution wasn't just about the social media ban. The ban was just the final trigger for a frustration that had been building up for a long time. The real reasons these young people went to the streets came from three big problems affecting their future. First, deep corruption and special treatment. Young people were angry about the entrenched corruption of politicians. They felt the government cared more about its own power and money than about them. This anger blew up with the hashtag #NepoKid trend on social media. This trend showed how rich and fancy the politicians' kids were, with their designer clothes and expensive cars. It was a shocking contrast to the daily struggles of regular people, and it made the public even angrier. Second, very high youth unemployment. More than 1 in 5 young people in Nepal are jobless. They feel like there's no hope for a future in Nepal, so many have had to leave the country to find work. Things are so bad that some have even joined the Russian military to earn money. Signs at the protests had a heartbreaking message. Politicians' children bring back Gucci bags from abroad, but the children of the common people are brought back in coffins. Third, constant political chaos. Since the king's rule ended in 2008, Nepal has had 13 different governments in less than 20 years. This constant change makes it impossible to have long-term plans and leads to more corruption. People have lost all trust in the system, and some are even saying it would be better to go back to having a king. All these problems built up a huge amount of anger and despair. The social media ban was just the small spark that finally lit the fuse. The people's rage, fueled by years of frustration, became a force the government couldn't stop. Under huge pressure, Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli resigned on September 9th. Other key ministers also quit. The quick resignations showed how weak the government really was. The entire political system began to fall apart. The army even had to use helicopters to save ministers and officials. In all the chaos, the protest took a bad turn. Criminals hijacked the protests, burning down banks and stealing money. More than 400 criminals escaped from jail and are now on the streets. In some videos, it even looked like police and army officers were helping the students, giving them water bottles, showing they were tired of the corruption too. Now that the government is gone, Nepal has no clear leader. The army chief has asked for peace. The most important thing happening now is that the army is talking with the Gen Z protest leaders. This crisis isn't just a problem for Nepal. Being between two big countries, India and China, Nepal's chaos is being watched closely. India has already told its citizens to be careful if they travel there, and has increased security at its border. The protests have stopped, for now, but this is more of a short break than a real solution. So, what is the biggest lesson from Nepal? This was a complex situation caused by decades of political problems, no economic growth, and corruption. The social media ban was a big trigger, but it was just the start of a much bigger problem. This protest is special because it was led by a young generation, which makes it both powerful and unpredictable. Nepal is a live example of what happens when a government tries to completely silence its people. The government ignored big issues like corruption and unemployment until it was too late. In the end, it was the power of a single generation that brought them down. You can't stop a generation by banning apps. You can't erase courage. You can't get rid of hope. You can't ban freedom. You are watching Academic Empire, and we will see you in the next one.
Because people are saying this is for social media, no. This is for like corruption.
I cannot believe my eyes right now. The whole of Parliament is on fire. People are dancing. None of it is left. Look at it. The whole building is burned through.
Will we change the fate of this nation, or will we let it remain in shackles? King Birendra once said, "Even if I die, shall my country live on?"